أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأفضل الصلاة وتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه من تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. We begin in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, and we send peace and blessings upon Muhammad and upon all of his chosen servants and messengers. Alhamdulillah, I'm very grateful to be here today. This is a beautiful opportunity. We thank Allah first and foremost for this opportunity that at some point, I hope in this series, we will hear a little bit about the history of this place and how it was built, but also how it came to be what it is today. It's not a given that you're able to do these kind of things in Turkey. 20 years ago, it was in fact entirely impossible to have this kind of meeting in Turkey. And that's not a story that I'm very well situated to tell, but I had an experience last year. I was with Dr. Ahmed and Dr. Recep Şentürk, who his son is here, but he himself is not able to be here today. We were sitting and he told us a little bit about the history of the place, which is I'll just give a brief summary that gives you the feel for it. They were here one day as there was a possibility of reopening this as a school for teaching the Islamic sciences. And a man came and told them, an older man, he came and he said, for as long as I can remember, this was used as a horse stable, and it was a place where people gathered to drink. Wow. For the Turkish people, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but for the Westerners, that, as with all of the beauty of this place, with the barakah that you feel in that masjid, that is really something to ponder and reflect on. How did it get to be that? And then how did it get to be what it is today, 20 years later, or less than 20 years later? And so we ask Allah that He reward the people who are responsible for that with the greatest of rewards. And that story, inshallah, will be told maybe in more zoomed out fashion, but that story we hope will be told as a part of this series, inshallah. And I think it's important for Muslims coming from the West who are enjoying the environment in Turkey to understand how this environment was created. And so we're grateful to Allah for this opportunity. We ask Allah that it continues and that it grows. The idea for this lecture series in some ways extends back to a series of conversations that Dr. Ahmed Snowden and I have had for a number of years, which is that the intellectual environment in Istanbul is, in many ways, is very unique. It's a place, as much as this sounds cliche, it's really a place where East and West meet, geographically speaking, but also intellectually speaking, and the heritage of Istanbul as the center of an empire is still alive today. Again, that's a story that's much too long to go into, but the place of Turkey within the Muslim world is important. And the collection of people that you get here in the summer without anybody planning, well, many people are planning, but there's no centralized planning, right? There's no centralized planning that said Chris Blauvelt and Shaun and a large number of other scholars who are visiting in the course of this summer in Istanbul. There's no one person who's making all of that happen, it's just happening. And the idea of the conversation series really is for an English-speaking audience, whether that is people who've come from America and come from the West, or whether that is people who've come from other places globally, or whether that is English-speaking Turks themselves. It's a unique opportunity to hear from all of these people in one place at one time. And I hope, inshallah, as we hear these different lectures, we will discover that what we have in common is much greater than the superficial divisions among us. And those superficial divisions could be geographical, they could be linguistic, they could be any number of things, but the verses that our Hafiz Ahmed Amin recited, they talk about the unity of Muslims. They talk about the unity of the Muslim Ummah. And that is a theological reality, and it's up to us to work to make it a physical reality on the ground. And I hope, inshallah, in the course of this series that we will discover some things that, you know, I'm benefiting from somebody, or I'm benefiting from somebody's experience who I never would have imagined that I would have had much in common with this person, or their life trajectory sounds very different from mine, or the things that they're talking about are very removed from the reality that I have lived in my life. But nonetheless, I'm learning from it, I'm benefiting from it, and I'm gaining something from it. So we ask Allah that He put barakah and guidance in what we do. And very happy to be here. I owe many thanks, too many to enumerate, but I want to thank Ustad Saleh, Jazakumullah khairan for hosting us. I want to thank again Dr. Ahmed Snowber for, in many ways, from the first moment that I was in Istanbul. Dr. Ahmed has too many favors upon me to enumerate. Ustad Midad, the head of Midad Institute, that's the thing that really has gathered many of us here. And on behalf of Na'iban and Dr. Rajab, we thank Furqan and his son, and everybody else behind the scenes who facilitated this. So I want to start just with a quick introduction. Again, we have a very heterogeneous audience here, and I want to give a quick introduction to our two guests. I think most of the people coming from the United States, you know the people on my left and my right, and you have no idea who I am. For the people who are maybe coming from Turkey or elsewhere, you may not know. So Chris Blauvelt is the founder of the largest, well, first of all, he was my next door neighbor when we were in high school, and we became Muslim together in high school, alhamdulillah. And our paths have been intertwined ever since. And the ayats that our Hafiz recited are always ayats that make me think of our relationship. وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ فَأَصْبَحْتُمْ بِنِعْمَتِهِ إِخْوَانًا. So Chris and I were not enemies, but nor were we friends. We were next door neighbors, but we weren't on the same page. And long story short, you know, he became really my Khalil. You know, somebody who we've been on parallel paths our whole lives. This is the first time really that we spend any significant amount of time together outside of the U.S. Alhamdulillah. And so there's a whole story, but what Chris is maybe publicly known for is the website LaunchGood.com, which is the largest crowdfunding website for Muslims around the world. So LaunchGood.com has activity in Turkey, it has activity in Malaysia, it has activity in just about every European country. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, about 158 countries around the world, there have been campaigns on this website for crowdfunding or sourcing for Muslims. Some of our students who are here this year did a crowdfunding campaign on LaunchGood.com for their expenses to come here to Turkey. So it's, I think, you know, $648 million have been raised through the website over about 10 years, and we ask Allah to increase it in barakah. And on my left, Shaun King, somebody who I just had the pleasure to meet a couple months ago, in person, really about just a few days ago. Again, if you're coming from America, needs no introduction, right? Probably the most significant online voice in the Black Lives Matter movement. Somebody who has been serving the causes of social justice in the United States for a few decades, through a variety of different means, but in many ways, I don't want to say primarily, but probably most prominently through online activism. And Shaun just did his Shahada. He just became a Muslim along with his wife Ray in Ramadan of this past year. and very blessed to have you guys with us this summer in Istanbul. I want to start with maybe just a fairly, it's a complex question, but hopefully one that can get the ball rolling in our conversation. For both of you, in the last 10 to 20 years, our lives have been revolutionized in many ways by these little devices, right? Nobody had one of these 20 years ago. All the things that we accomplished with them, we accomplished through other means 20 years ago. And whether it's a smartphone or whether it's AI or whether it's whatever is coming next, our lives have rapidly changed due to these devices. They present opportunities and they present challenges, right? One of the things that has gone along with this is not necessarily caused by it, but we could say it correlates with it, is a deterioration of physical communities, families, social ties, religious communities. There's a sociologist who wrote a book called Bowling Alone. Anybody ever heard of this book? A couple people, yeah. The idea of the book is that people used to have these local things that gathered them. You can see it here in Turkey, whether it's the cafe or it's the tepke, or it's a local place that people go, gather, and they do something together, and it creates a physical community. For a younger generation, oftentimes they don't really experience that, and they're growing up where their community is all mediated through this thing, right? And it's actually not good for people. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about your experience building something very significant through a virtual platform, but also knowing that what was built in many ways has interplay and is interdependent or interconnected with real lived experiences. So if you could just comment kind of on the interplay and the relationship between those two things, inshallah.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum. I'm so glad to be here with all of you. I'm so honored to be in this sacred place. We're honored to be Muslims, and thank all of you for welcoming me and my family as new Muslims. It's been the honor of our lives, and we're grateful. This place is beautiful, and so to imagine it as a horse stable or anything else, it speaks to the vision of those who said, no, we can recover it and make it into what it was intended to be. So we're honored to be here. It does, in the United States, we would say it has a vibe. It has a vibe, and you're here and you feel it. And so as soon as we walked on, my wife and I both love this space so much. It's so beautiful, but it's deeper than just the trees and the breeze. There's something here. It's a great question, and it's powerful that Chris, who is my brother, who I've known for many years now, is here, because the beauty of being able to form online communities is that we can find sisters and brothers around the world who share common interests that otherwise we never would have known. When I was first a student leader, when I started college in 1997, and in 97, 98, 99, I was one of the most known student leaders in the country, but there was really no internet, and there was no social media. And so to find people who cared about what you cared about, it was much, much more difficult. And so I remember in 2001, in September of 2001, a group of students and I attended Morehouse College. It's a historically black college for men. It's where Dr. Martin Luther King went to college. And me and a group of students were blessed to be able to go to South Africa. And again, apartheid was much closer in 2001. So apartheid had really only ended 7 years earlier. And none of us had passports. And none of us had ever even heard of a Palestinian. We had no idea what a Palestinian was or what Gaza was. And you could not tell us at that time that, like, me and the group of students that I was with, that, like, we thought we were important. And when we got to South Africa, we were shocked because in almost every room we went into, there were student leaders with kafiyas. We didn't know what a kafiya was. And I was used to being the most popular student in the room, but Palestinians were always the most popular students in the room. And we were asking ourselves, who are these people? And why does everyone in South Africa love them so much? Well, even my own children could answer that question today in huge part because social media connects us together in ways that just weren't available to me. I had never touched a Palestinian. I never knew a Palestinian. And so to meet somebody, just as Dr. Dan said, you had to be in the same physical space with them. And so it's beautiful today to me that my introduction to Palestinians was through South Africans. And we learned very quickly this deep, rich bond in history between South Africans and Palestinians. And around that time, just a few years after that, social media began to grow, and it allowed many of us to connect with freedom fighters around the world, people who shared our common interest around the world. And for the past 20 years, I've really thrown my heart and soul into building communities online. And there was no platform more that I had really poured my heart and soul into building a community than Instagram. Because there are people on Instagram from 175 countries, from every type of political party, ethnic group, religious group, and I learned something that really has everything to do with why LaunchGood was built. What I learned just this past December is when you pour your heart and soul into building a community that is owned by Zionists, they can remove you at their will. And what's wild about that is I've been a guest speaker at Meta, at Facebook. In October, November, December, executives at Instagram would regularly ask me to mediate conflicts between their staff and Palestinian users of the platform. The wife of Mark Zuckerberg donated $1 million to my organization. So I thought I was in a protected class of people. Vice President at Meta, who I thought was my friend, every year would call me and wish me happy birthday. I know the names of his children. So I'd never been suspended on the platform before. I had almost 6 million followers, and in some ways, arrogantly thought that my account was too big for them to remove. I underestimated the power of Zionism. And I really underestimated how important it is for us to own and control our own platforms. I cannot tell you how many sisters and brothers I saw that started fundraisers on a dozen other platforms, not just for Gaza, but for needs all around the world, only to have those fundraisers canceled, removed, to have all the donations that they worked hard to gain refunded. The beauty of having a place like LaunchGood is it was created for us and by us, and there's just a level of security there. So social media, it's simultaneously beautiful and painful. It can help us, it can hurt us. It can build movements. It can also fuel gossip. It can spread the truth. Imagine if we had to rely on BBC or any other news platform to tell us what was happening in Gaza. Imagine if there was no Instagram. no YouTube, no Facebook, no Twitter, no Telegram, if there were no platforms, we would have no idea that it is as atrocious as it is, because we don't control BBC, we don't even control TRT or others, like in the way that they're just an unfiltered truth. And so, while there is great opportunity there, Dr. Dan, they can also cancel and remove you at any given moment. And so it causes you to not say the thing that you know needs to be said. Not because the truth doesn't need to be heard, but because you don't want to lose your account. And so it's beautiful because you see that you're not alone. Without social media, one of the most powerful things that I saw happen just over the past few months, when protests took over college campuses in the United States, it came at a time of great discouragement in Gaza, where this genocide was no longer a month old, 2 months old. It had dragged on for 6 months. People were literally hungry, sick, starving, traumatized. And suddenly they saw, through the power of social media, they saw privileged, often white students from all races, putting their bodies on the line, protesting on America's campuses. And then our sisters and brothers in Gaza decided to start writing messages to college students in America on the outsides of their tents. And all of a sudden you would see on the outside of a tent in Gaza, "Thank you, Columbia University. Thank you, New York University." And what did that do to the American students? They felt seen, and so they said, "We won't quit, we won't leave, we won't move." So social media allows people around the world to see each other. And sometimes when you are experiencing immense suffering and there's no end in sight, sometimes all that can happen is to know that you're being seen. And it can allow you to live, to push, to go another day. And so it allows us to spread truths, but it also allows propaganda to go as well. And so the sum total of it, Dr. Dan, is still good. It allows women to have a voice and a platform in places and countries where women are not given the microphone, are not given the pen. A woman could literally just say, "I'm going to open up this account, I'm going to say what I need to say, I'm going to show you what I need to show you from the perspective of a 22-year-old Palestinian woman. I'm thinking of Bisa. If not for Instagram and TikTok, would we know her? Would we see what she sees? Would anybody have given her the platform, the microphone?" So it can also be a great equalizer, but we are always just a step away from someone saying, "I'm not going to allow you to say that any longer." And so it's a double-edged sword, but I think the net gain of it is still very positive. Has it ended the genocide? No. But has it allowed the world to see it, stand up against it? Has it allowed us to document war crimes? Would the ICC or ICJ even have gotten as far as they've gotten so far, which is not enough? Would they have gotten this far without it? I don't think so. And so it's still profound, but it has real limitations as well.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it to Chris.
Repeat the question.
So it's a little bit about, you know, the online community that you built and how you see it intersecting with physical communities on the ground.
All right, so this is, I'm going to do a little exercise, get you guys involved. Okay, raise your hand if you have friends or family in North America. Okay, that's the easy one. How about Europe? Okay, how about Asia? Africa? Australia? South America? South America, okay, even some hands up for South America. You notice, like, within this, 100 people here or so, there's not a continent, well, actually, did I say Australia? I said Australia. There's not a continent, maybe Antarctica, that we don't have connections to. And, you know, for LaunchGood, we wanted to understand, every business has to do this, by the way. You have to understand what's your serviceable, addressable market. And meaning, like, yeah, there are 2 billion Muslims in the world, but half of them live in poverty, they don't have credit cards, they cannot really donate on the platform. That's not our market exactly. So who is our market? So we did this exercise many years ago. We came up with an acronym. It's a very good acronym here in Turkey. It's called GUMMIES, but not the Haribo style gummy bears that are very popular here. It stands for Global Urban Muslims who are educated in English speaking. GUMMES, gummies. Global Urban Muslims who are educated in English speaking. Basically, English speaking Muslims. So how many English speaking Muslims do we have in the United States? Approximately. Quick answer. Let's say, I think maybe 5 million. Some say 10, I think it's 5. In the UK, maybe like 3. In Canada, maybe 2 million. That's like 10 million between those 3 countries. It's not a lot. That's a very, the state of Michigan has 10 million people, right? It's like 10 million is a small market. But every country in the world has gummies. Everyone. If you go to Australia, there's about 500,000 gummies. If you go to Singapore, there's about 1 million gummies in Singapore. Even Muslim majority countries, you take something like Malaysia that has about 40 million Muslims. You know, about 8 million of those Muslims are educated in English speaking. Pakistan, I know we got Pakistan. How many people live in Pakistan? 200 million or something? Yeah, I think, you know, I think our estimates, I have to look up my number, but it's something like 10, 15 million gummies in Pakistan. So if you start adding this up, every country, I'm not, like, you can't name a country that does not have Muslims. North Korea has Muslims. Okay, like every country has Muslims. I want to hear some guesses. How many Muslims do you think all of these gummies add up to? You guys speak louder, I can't hear you. 200 million, 100 million. Someone else say something? 350 million. If it was a country, it would be larger than the United States of America. America is about 330 million. So it'd be the 3rd largest country in the world. So if you could create a digital country of all these English-speaking Muslims, right? Because I assume, you know, mashallah, you got a great social media platform. You're talking in English primarily, or very exclusively probably, right? Yeah. So there is something, because English is the language, what's the correct term of that? Like the aficionado language, or?
Lingua franca.
Lingua franca, you gotta talk to the doctor, right? English is the lingua franca of the modern zeitgeist. And it's the language of the power. And Muslims are really starting to make their mark. Now, October 7th has really changed things. Because I used to go out there and try to tell people, this is a massively underserved market, it's a massively undervalued market. People don't realize just how powerful we Muslims are. But actually, since September 7th, that is changing. Because now everyone's like, we're going to boycott McDonald's because of what the franchises in Israel are doing. So what did McDonald's do? You know what they did? They bought back every single franchise in Israel. Can you believe that? That we Muslims, we poor, weak little Muslims, divided across 170 whatever countries in the world, can get, what, top 10, 20 corporations in the world to radically change their strategy and approach? I can't imagine, like a year ago, if you took, like, I could not imagine we could put enough pressure on McDonald's that they feel obliged to buy back their franchises because the franchise owners are giving free meals to IDF soldiers. Starbucks, Who's drinking Starbucks out here? Who's boycotting Starbucks? Unpopular opinion, I don't think actually they should be boycotted, but I boycott them because I just love to see the impact we can have. Right? We're like, hey, you have some very vague, loose connection to not even your founder, but your CEO to Zionists and IDF. We're boycotting you. And I was like, you know how much money Starbucks lost in the last year? $11 billion. 11. This is a company that always every year they make more and more and more money. They lost $11 billion. And they don't even know what to do because, again, they actually don't have any policy. You know, Starbucks is going to be forced to say that we support Palestine or freedom in Palestine because there's actually no policy that they need to change. They don't have any pro-IDF policy. But they have to show the community, this global Muslim community, that we're not okay with this genocide. You watch, they will be pressured. So I think it's very interesting. We look at this global community of Muslims. The more we awake to our collective power, the more we can leverage it and actually drive things in the right direction. And I think Turkey is a good example of that. I mean, Turkey, even though, okay, I don't know, I get in trouble saying stuff here. But I was here 20 years ago when, Dr. Dan was talking about how Turkey was back then. I had like a little beard, like not even that beard, smaller. It was a young guy, like that guy's beard, right? Like, and I got in trouble, for having a little beard. Now everyone, no problem, go walk around with beard and turban and stuff like that. So it's an exciting time. I did put a tweet out. I had some slides. This is not the right environment to show the slides. But I got some really cool slides that talk about this, and you can see it. And there's a page on LaunchGood when we were celebrating Eid. We put up an Eid page, launchgood.com/Eid, E-I-D. And there's a globe on there. You can spin it around, and it has all the donors from the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, which it's a lot. It's like 70,000 donors. In Ramadan, we had 700,000. So the Ramadan one was much bigger, but right now we have the Dhul Hijjah one up. We have, guess how many countries are represented through those 70,000 donors from the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. It's not our biggest season, like Ramadan's 10 times bigger, but it's significant. How many countries are represented by those donors? 100? 30? 167.
Wow.
And I swear, I'm pulling up. First of all, we have a donor in Antarctica. I don't know how that happened. Second, there are little islands in the Pacific, in the Atlantic. I've never even heard of these islands. Some of them only got internet in the last 5 years. And subhanAllah, they're donors. So really, this is a fascinating, incredible community, this global Muslim community. And I think the internet is giving us an opportunity to do something we've never done before. Because before this, you had to, power lied in politics. And do we really have any hope of all these Muslim leaders and kings and dictators deciding, hey, we're going to unite and have one united Muslim country? No. There's really I don't have any immediate hope for that. But we don't need that in some sense now because the internet allows all those voices from that regular people to come together and have a collective impact. And it's remarkable.
So I think to some extent you both spoke about global connectivity, right? At a fairly large scale, and for you as well, talking about connecting to South Africa and Palestine as a young student activist. How does that intersect with the local forms of community where, for many people, if not most people in the world, their day-to-day experiences are happening, right? So I don't know, Shaun, if you want to speak at all about your experience as a pastor of a church, or Chris, if you can talk about particular campaigns on LaunchGood that maybe serve as kind of a lesson or a case study for how those intersections take place. But when we talk about what we're experiencing right now, the place that we're sitting, it's a relationship between a handful of individuals who saw each other face to face that leads to this, right? So the global always intersects with the local, right? And so can you talk a little bit about that intersection, Shaun?
Yeah. First, I was fascinated by everything you said, man. It was just so insightful. We came straight here from the Blue Mosque, and when I think I lost like a pound sweating inside of the Blue Mosque. And when I got up, I was drenched in sweat, and there was a British man and his son, who I'd never met face to face before, who recognized me from the internet. I mean, I'm in another country. This is my first time in Istanbul. I'm on the third line from the front, and someone knows me. That's happened to me every day that I've been here. It's online, but it is real. These are real people. Many people, when I meet them, for them, it doesn't feel like they just met me because we were waiting for our taxi. And a sister from Malaysia, I saw she and her kids, they were looking at us and smiling. I thought maybe they recognized me. And her kids had basically said, you know, Mom, if it's him, go up and ask if it's him. And I was him. But it's beautiful because to her, I'm not a stranger. And so it makes our world small in that way. At our local masjid in New Jersey, we have a WhatsApp group. And I did not know that to be a Muslim meant to be a part of 100 WhatsApp groups that I'm learning. But our WhatsApp group brings us together. We learn our announcements. We get updates. I'm a part of the WhatsApp group for this program. Technology allows these beautiful ways to make connections online and offline. There are sisters and brothers that I feel so close to around the world that I have never physically met before. There was a young man named Ali that I was in Gaza. Many of you, Ali and I have done all types of projects together in Gaza over the past 9 months. I've never touched Ali, but we've told each other we love each other. I've cried for him, I pray for him. I worry about him every day. His family, because I'm no longer on Instagram, his family follows my wife. And so Ali's father asked Ali today to ask me how my mother-in-law was doing. You see, in Gaza, a man I've never met before, his father, through seeing something my wife said, asked about my mother-in-law. It makes our world small in that way. And it's real, it's sincere. There was a time where I thought of online life as not real and offline life as real. But it's more gray than that. It makes our world small. It allows us to make connections. Chris and I have interacted online for years and years, but just physically saw each other in person for the first time a few days ago. But it's not like I'm glad to meet you. We've been meeting. We've had Zooms. We've had online conferences. And so it allows us to kind of bridge the gap of space. Whereas it used to be you had to live almost in immediate proximity with people to know them. You can get to know people in such different ways. Thank you. The last thought was I don't trust myself enough to believe that I would be a Muslim today if 2 or 3 things that I'm about to tell you had not happened. Certainly, it was me seeing online, often on Instagram, through WhatsApp, through messages. It was me not seeing the genocide, but it was me seeing the deep faith of Palestinians up close in a way that I didn't understand. I've spoken at Muslim conferences for many years, for 10 plus years. Some of my best friends are Muslims, but being able to see the faith of Palestinians online showed me Islam in a way that I had never understood it before. And so what I was seeing on my phone touched my heart. Not my digital heart, my heart, my soul. It changed me. But then, when they banned me from Instagram, at first I was very bitter about it. And as you gave some of those numbers, there was something fascinating that happened. On October the 6th, the top 10 countries for my followers were all American. The day before I was banned, 7 of the top 10 countries of my followers were outside of the United States, and were countries outside of the United States. And so even my own world had gotten bigger. By the day before I was banned on Christmas Eve, on December 23rd, from October 7th to December 23rd, over 3 million people had unfollowed me already. But 6.5 million people had followed me. And when I lost that account, at first I was bitter because I had poured my heart and soul into building this community, and I had raised tens of millions of dollars just through that Instagram account alone for causes and campaigns and charities. But it took me really deep into Ramadan to understand this. I don't believe if I still had that account, I'm not convinced I would be a Muslim. I would probably just still be on Instagram, pushing, chugging, doing everything that I could, but losing it removed so much noise from my life, good and bad, that it caused me to ask questions that I wasn't asking. It caused me to ask myself, who am I? When I would travel in New York City, I would be on the subway, and I would hear people say, this is before I was banned, sweetly, people would say, there's @Shaun King. Like my first name is my last name is Shaun King. And I would think like, no, I'm Shaun. There is an account with @Shaun King, but this is just me. And so I had to ask, if I'm not @Shaun King, who am I? Where am I going? What am I supposed to do with myself if this thing that I thought I was going to have indefinitely no longer exists? And the removal of that noise, really, it created the space for me to see that not just the beauty of Islam, but what it would mean for me to be a Muslim. And I think one of the most beautiful things people have said to me to encourage my soul was I might have lost 6 million followers, but I gained 2 billion sisters and brothers from all over the world. And today, I mean this from the depths of my soul, I would trade that Instagram account to be a Muslim every 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If they offered it back to me, but I could no longer be a Muslim, they could keep it. If they said, we will give you 100 million followers if you denounce Gaza, if you denounce Yemen, please keep that. Because I at least have the peace of mind of knowing that I am where I'm supposed to be. But social media still had so much to do with that, and even removing it from my life had so much to do with it. So it's the timing of Allah. I would never have planned it this way myself, and had I tried to plan it, I would have messed it all up. And so the way your online and offline lives can intersect, if you let it, it can be a truly beautiful thing. Now, Dr. Dan and Chris are my brothers in a way, just because we finally have seen each other in person. We've shared a meal together, our families have met each other. It started online, but now it's offline. And so, but you have to still take that step. I still had to take Shahada. I still had to take a step forward. And so, these intersections can be beautiful and meaningful, but you still have to seek it, and I hope that makes sense.
You said is this on?
Yeah.
You said a word that stood out, which is noise. You know, like you had to be removed, actually, to get rid of that noise so you could focus on what was important. And I do think, you know, we've talked about a lot of the benefits of technology, but that is a real concern. I think for me, I think for you, we've talked about it, like so much noise is created for social media, and sometimes we mix up the noise for the signal, meaning, you know, superfluous stuff becomes very serious all of a sudden. And you'll see, I'm on Twitter a lot, so they call it Muslim Twitter. You'll see a lot of fighting and bashing and exposing and, you know, accusations being thrown around, and I'm sure that this exists on Facebook and Instagram and everywhere. It's the nature of these platforms. You know, in fact, it's the nature of humans. Imam Al-Ghazali, obviously, we existed way before social media. He said, oh, if you want to be a popular imam, like in his time, just go around denouncing the other imams and like attacking their, but that's not real Islam. And subhanAllah, you know, Islam is there's so much emphasis on brotherhood. I mean, we said, actually, I'm going to pass to him to talk about it, but that was one of the things that I loved about becoming Muslim, is that concept of brotherhood. I came in largely through Mike and the autobiography of Malcolm X. And for Malcolm, it was going to Hajj and seeing, you know, a dark African sitting down with a fair-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Muslim, and they're eating their hands in the same bowl, and they're just brothers. And I became Muslim in our first Ramadan, subhanAllah, we were sitting in a circle. He wasn't with me, or he wasn't in that circle, but every person in that circle had a different nationality. I was like, it's real. You know, this brotherhood of Islam is a very real thing. And I worry, you know, the thing, if you look at Muslim history, when did Muslims suffer? It's when we allowed ourselves to become divided, and our hearts to become divided. And when did we thrive? Is when we came together as people. So I do worry about this with social media. The nature of social media is to cause division, to cause controversies. That makes it like addictive, you know. And you probably, I know you've experienced that more than me because you're such a social media personality. Like, it's got to be so exhausting sometimes to have all that noise and just forget that, you know, people are people, and you know, like in person, you realize that you go to the masjid and you're like, yeah, like that uncle, he's kind of annoying, he's always doing that thing, but like he's still the uncle of the masjid and we respect him. But online, you might just like, you're very quick to denounce somebody, unfollow them, trash them, etc.
Did you want to comment? So the verses that were recited at the beginning of this meeting, not the first or second, but eventually he closed on a point where Allah says, وَلْتَكُنْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. Let there be from among you a nation that calls to good. LaunchGood. وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, and they command what is right. وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ, and they forbid what is wrong. So I think both of you, your life's work, maybe to different degrees, it exists in what that ayah invites us to do, what that verse invites us to do. A group of people who calls to what is good and enjoins what is right and forbids what is wrong. And I'm wondering if you could comment on both the opportunities and challenges that you see in those two mandates, if you will, based on your experience over the last couple of decades, inshallah. And for Shaun in particular, I know this is fresh, but it's not uncommon to hear people who convert to Islam, and I haven't heard you say this, and I'm not trying to impose it. Some people would not say this, but it's not uncommon to hear people say something like, Islam was not actually a shift for me. It wasn't a fundamental change in direction. It brought clarity and it enhanced what I was already doing. It's not that I feel like I was not this before. It's more that I gained a level of clarity that I didn't know was possible. And I'm wondering, in terms of the work that you're doing, how do you see the relationship of that to your experience now entering into the fold of Islam, as you talked about?
When we, on the first day of Ramadan, my wife and I, we traveled to Dallas, and I've been good friends with Sheikh Omar Suleiman for the past 10 years. And when we took our Shahada, he leaned over and he whispered in my ear, he said, I've been praying for this for the past 8 years. And I told him, I said, if you had told me this 8 years ago, I might have been a Muslim 8 years ago. And he told me, he said, no, it's the timing of Allah. And I thought about him saying that. I trust him in his wisdom. If, I can only speak for myself, but if I had become a Muslim as a teenager, and you may have heard me tell this story in 1997, and the three of us are all about the same age. In 1997, a good friend of mine, Calvin Morton, and Calvin and I, we weren't good friends. We were friends, but we had also both just read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And you'll find no book has impacted Muslim converts in America more than this book. And we at least had the intelligence enough, we both wanted to be like Malcolm. And we had the intelligence enough to know that to be like Malcolm, more than anything, meant to be a Muslim. And the town we lived in, there were no masjids, there were no mosques in this little town we lived in. And there was no Google. And so we literally had to look in the yellow pages. Many of you have, when I say yellow pages, many of you are like, I have no idea what he's talking about. They used to send big, huge books to your house once or twice a year, full of everyone's phone numbers. They would send you a book with like 50,000 people's phone numbers in there, their names and numbers there, and every business. And we found a mosque in Lexington, Kentucky. They would not call themselves this today, but a lot has changed. It was a black mosque, an African-American mosque. It was called Masjid Bilal. And we went up, we called, and it was so small, I think we just called someone's home phone number. And the mosque was actually in just like a small house. And we went up there, and the imam told us, he said, brothers, if you come on Friday, I can give you something and they'll excuse your absence from school. And both of our eyes lit up because anything to get out of school sounded great to us. So for 3 straight Fridays in 1997, Calvin drove us to Masjid Bilal in Lexington, Kentucky. And then we realized that our school didn't check our paperwork, So we just stopped going to the masjid and just skipped school every Friday for like weeks and weeks and weeks and never went back. And had I become a Muslim then, and my wife and I, our niece just became a Muslim. She lives in that town in Lexington, Kentucky. And my wife gave her her Shahada, and we took her back to Masjid Bilal, where there was the first masjid I ever stepped foot into. The Imam had retired, but he was still there. And to see him, and here's what's wild. He said, I saw a man named Shaun King take his Shahada all over the internet, but I did not know that that was you who came to Masjid Bilal in 1997. Had I become a Muslim then, I might have messed it all up. Even in my 20s or 30s, that we became Muslims in our 40s allowed us to have a degree of perspective, a degree of wisdom, experience. My wife has her doctorate, I have my master's. We're educated. It allowed me to have lifelong relationships with Muslims that I formed before I became a Muslim. So, in some ways, Dr. Dan, I would say, yes, it has confirmed and enhanced and improved our lives, but some things, in some ways, our lives are very, very different. We became Muslims in part. I said this, I now use LinkedIn a lot. It seems like they're not going to ban me, at least for now. And so now I have like 50,000 followers on LinkedIn, but it allows me to influence executives around the world. And I said this on LinkedIn, and they removed it. And we became Muslims because we felt like, in some ways, our lives as Christians lacked structure and purpose and direction, and we loved God, and we had a deep love and affection and admiration for Jesus, but it lacked structure. And for most American Christians, to be a Christian means to occasionally go to a service on Sunday. And if you do that and say you're a Christian, it could be enough. Well, we were looking for much more than that, and Islam has given that to us. It's provided structure, direction, it's answered questions. Islam also encourages excellence, intelligence, study, research. Often, and this is not true of all Christians, but often in American Christianity seems to be anti-intellectual. And I'm married to an intellectual. I'm married to a scholar. And it often didn't seem compatible. And so it for me, Dr. Dan, in so many ways, it truly feels like my whole life led me to this moment. And just as Sheikh Omar Suleiman said, no, it's the timing of Allah, I embraced that. And at first, there are many days where I say, wow, I wish, because you can fit what I know about Islam into this cup. Like right now, you could fit what I know about the Quran into this cup. And I thought, had I become a Muslim in 1997, it would at least fill 2 cups. And so there are parts of me some days that feel like I've missed 25 years of opportunities to study, to learn, to grow. But that was not the plan of Allah for me. And so I'm leaning into that, I'm embracing it, and just accepting that this is where I am now, and it's beautiful. And yet there are, I will say, I'll close with this, there are many things about being a Muslim that I think I had immediately romanticized. And so I did not know. So the day we took Shahada, it was all over the internet, and it was beautiful, and it was encouraging. It was on the news in Turkey. It was in the newspapers in Istanbul. It made the news. It made newspapers in 20 different countries. 2 or 3 days later, it got really ugly, really fast, and with Muslims saying this is fake. He's doing this for show. He's doing this for clout. He's trying to be popular. I don't even believe him. And much, much worse, like significantly worse. Or I would see people, my wife and I see people say, I can't believe this man dragged his family into Islam. Not knowing that it is, in many ways, deeply true that when my wife decided to become a Muslim, it gave me courage to also do it. It's much deeper than that. And I don't know if anybody has ever become a Muslim for clout. I don't know if that's actually a thing. I don't know if that's a real thing that people do. But it showed me that no, Muslims are human. Muslims are fallible. Muslims make every mistake that everybody else makes. And one of the things that everyone wants us to know is, Shaun, Islam is perfect and Muslims are not. And that's and of course that's true, because Muslims are human beings. And so I don't allow myself to get bent out of shape when we see people all over the map saying all the things that people say. But the last thing to something that Chris said, I think I am trying to reorient my life such that everything I do, I ask myself, would Allah be pleased with this? Not, would it get likes, would it get clicks, would it get retweets, would it get shares, would this make me popular? But am I saying something, am I doing something, am I living in a way that pleases Allah? And almost nothing else matters to me. And I say that that's my goal. It's my hope to live that way every day, and I have to renew that intention every single day. But it's a much more beautiful way to live your life, and it's been much more fulfilling for me as well.
I don't have anything to add. Can we just take questions?
Okay. So I think maybe we open it up to questions from the audience, and I'm going to take one or two at a time, and if there's some overlap between them, we'll combine them. So do we have any questions from the audience?
I had a question when you mentioned, for example, McDonald's, and you mentioned the followers from this many countries. We're centering it around the Muslim community, but I think especially since October 7, this has been a wider thing involving many non-Muslims, and maybe even more non-Muslims than Muslims in the context of the US and UK.
Yeah, definitely.
So I was wondering, especially with your embracing of Islam in mind, how does social media, being primarily an open platform where Muslims, non-Muslims, everybody can see everybody, how does that have an impact on the kind of work that you're doing? And are you thinking for Muslims, or are you thinking in general? And like, how do you factor that in? Thank you.
I think that's a good question. Yeah.
I'll be brief so we can get to many questions, but that's the beauty of these open platforms. The entire world has gotten to see Islam in ways that it never has. I spoke in Doha in December, before I became a Muslim, and this was when the 5-year-old Reem had just been killed, the granddaughter of Khalid. And we were all overwhelmed with emotion to see this grandfather in a turban combing the hair of his granddaughter, wanting it to be in the style that he knew she would like. And I could cry just remembering where he tried to open Reem's eyes because he thought that there was just maybe a slight possibility that she was still alive. Khalid alone, just him, not Gaza, not Palestine, not the Muslim world, not the Umma, just Khalid, him alone. He is stronger than all propaganda, all lies about what Muslim men are like, the heart, the soul of Muslim men. He touched, and he had no consciousness that he was even being filmed in that moment. That meant nothing to him. This was just a human moment that was being captured. Then the whole world saw it, not the Muslim world, but the entire world saw him. Me and another brother that now travels and supports him, we begged Khalid for months and months and months to open an Instagram account. We said, brother, people want to see you, they love you, and he does. And he has a bike, and I worry about him every day, but he is stronger than Hollywood. He is stronger than Israeli propaganda, and it being exposed to the whole world is so profound. And so we do have to be mindful that it's not just Muslims who see us, it's the entire world. And it gives people an opportunity. I don't know, in my lifetime, I don't know if there have ever been more soft hearts toward Islam from non-Muslims than we have today. People who have not yet made a step to become Muslim, but now see it very, very differently. And that's because these things happen on platforms where everyone is there. All the countries, all the people, and you can't watch Khalid with Reem in his arms and not be moved by it, and not say, who is that? Why is he that way? And Khalid would gladly, he's a devout man, he would gladly tell anyone that it was Islam, it was the strength of Allah through him that has allowed him to stand through these moments. And so, yes, I, even now, as being a Muslim just for 5 months, I now see my primary audience as Muslims. But the truth is, when I had a campaign on LaunchGood during Ramadan, probably half of my donors were not Muslims. Half of my donors had to open up new accounts on LaunchGood. They'd never heard of it before. And so it's an opportunity for us to show the world this. And then lastly, many of my teachers and of the elders and sheikhs that have guided me, they said that they wanted me to keep my name because I was thinking I may change my name. And they said no, and I've embraced this. They said no, people know a man named Shaun King, and we now want them to know that the man they knew, Shaun King, is a Muslim. And so I accepted that. And maybe there'll be a time where that changes, but we're being thoughtful to say, we still want non-Muslims who knew me before to admit it's still me as a Muslim.
you. Got a 1, 2, 3, so I'm going to take 1, 2, see if there's any overlap. Can somebody be
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Midad. Thank you very much, Shaun, my co-professor, for all the wonderful words and time and wisdom. I feel when looking around at social media, looking around at what people are doing online, looking around at the stresses of of modernity, of short attention spans, a post-COVID world, people's emotional needs, psychological needs. I feel people are thirsting spiritually in many, many ways. And I think it leads to what people suffer from, higher depression, higher confusion. Of course, part of that is social media and everything else, the good and the bad of it. And this thirsting spiritually is also leading into people exploring and having avenues to explore on social media in ways that you describe, and other figures such as yourself or other in-depth podcasts, or just the whole, converts especially that have been documenting their journey post just seeing Palestine and so forth. So all that is kind of happening accidentally, as you're describing it. What comes to your minds of what Muslims, whether organizations, individually, people with platforms such as yourself that you already have, whether it's LaunchGood, whether it's whatever else, what can be done to get deeper and provide more, kind of spiritual answers, spiritual food? Because I feel like one downside of social media is it's giving everybody access and view, but then it leads to perhaps maybe a handful of people then using that as a launching point to go deep enough to then find ways to spiritually transform and change. And maybe way more than if there weren't social media, but what can be done then proactively? Because this is all happening accidentally and it's beautiful, but your thoughts on what can be done proactively by us, by organizations, or by yourselves, people with platforms.
Thank you. So you take your newest question too.
Everything's interconnected, but it's a little bit different than that. Do you so we did?
That's okay. We take the question and then we'll divide the time.
All right then.
So thank you guys again for sharing. Really appreciate it. My question is about how to practically stay active, consistent in the work that it truly takes to fight injustice and create change, and so many different issues for so many different people in so many different places happening at the same time. In other words, I kind of say this, the local, national, and international issues. How do you stay focused and impactful with such a large spectrum?
So I'm going to give you both an opportunity to address whatever you want within those two questions.
Actually, I see a lot of overlap. Abdullah gave me a book. I was roommates with Abdullah. There's another brother, Dr. Dan here. Amjad Tarsi, Ustad Amjad Tarsi. And we got out of college and they seemed to really know what they were doing, like going down this religious path. And I was like, well, I'm sort of engineer, I don't want to do that. Maybe I want to open up a Muslim school, I'm not sure. I wasn't quite sure. And he gave me a book called Tanwir fi Tadbir. Is that Tanwir fi Isqat Tadbir. Illumination through leaving off planning, I guess how you say. And this is part of faith, is you have to listen to your heart and listen to what God wants from you. Yeah. And Islam is a religion which, to me, really stresses this. Allah says in the Quran, وَعَلَمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَحُولُ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَقَلْبِ. Know that it's God who intercedes between a man and his heart. And the Prophet ﷺ, in a hadith, he said, "Istafti qalbak." seek advice, counsel, or fatwa, like seek counsel, maybe the best way to say it, from your heart. People say something, check your heart. And when you pray istikhara, like we have the big decision, you're supposed to pray istikhara. And I think it was Ibn Ata'illah said that if everyone just followed what God put in their heart, all the needs of the world would be taken care of. And so, I actually don't think we have to be so strategic. I think we have to be much more inspired and full of the faith that it takes to put our trust in God and listen to what God's telling us to do. Because sometimes we know, like, oh, maybe I should leave my corporate job and start a Muslim financial institution. But it's scary, right? Sometimes we feel like, oh, I want to organize on a national, international level. There's so much happening, but I just love working in my community and teaching Sunday school. Like, trust God, trust your heart, and inshallah, if we do that more as a community, I believe that things will arrange for themselves, inshallah.
Yeah, first, great questions from both of you. I actually don't have a whole lot to add to what Chris said, and that resonates with my heart as well. I honestly think that as Muslims, we are barely scratching the surface of our potential in the world. There are days where that frustrates me. There are days where when I think about our numbers versus our output, that it irritates me. That there are 2 billion of us, but 2 billion of us can't get this cup of water into Gaza.
Yeah.
I'm ashamed by that. Something's wrong there. But I could spend the rest of the evening opining on what's wrong. But that there are 2 billion of us, and we can't get a speck of corn in there, I can't speak for you, it brings me shame. I struggle. As a man, the word that I would typically use would be, it emasculates me to see people that I care about so deeply suffering so much. My way would be to go, to help, to stop. And so when I learned, dear sister, when I learned this, and please, some of the best advice that Sheikh Omar Suleiman gave me was, because I was a pastor for 15 years. And he said, Shaun, you became a Muslim, but you're not an imam. Not yet, and maybe never. He said, so you're not a scholar, not yet, maybe never. He said, so give yourself time to learn. But there was a passage that I heard, a verse that I heard, and forgive me if I don't have it exactly right. But it says, when we see injustice, it was the order of this that has rocked me to my soul. I can't shake it. I think about it daily. It says, when you see injustice, first stop it with your hands. And then it says, if that doesn't work, which infers you first try to stop it with your hands, and if that doesn't work, then use your mouth. And if that doesn't work, it says, then feel it in your heart. But it doesn't even stop there. It then says, which is the least of all of these. I'm afraid that practically speaking, as Muslims, we've reversed it. We all feel it in our hearts and occasionally speak against it with our mouths, but almost never stop it with our hands. Imagine if 2 billion of us said, you know what, I'm stopping this with my hands. It would be over. In fact, it wouldn't take 2 billion of us. If a fraction of us just said, yes, I feel it in my heart, yes, I've made a post on Facebook, but I'm going to honor this verse, and I'm going to do everything I can to confront this evil, this injustice with my hands, it would not happen. It would be over. But I am concerned that we are overcome with fear or cowardice or something akin to one of those, and we've grown so comfortable feeling it in our hearts, but the verse said that's the least of these. And so when I think about who we are, what we are barely scratching the surface of what we're capable of. Now here's why that's beautiful. I think I would feel even worse if we had actually maximized our potential and the genocide was still there. If we had all used our hands and it didn't work, that would be soul crushing. I still have hope because only a tiny number of us have even honored that verse. So the potential for us to do more, to live more, to be better, to do better, the potential is still there. But Chris is right. You don't overanalyze it, don't overthink it, just do something. Start by doing what's in front of you. Do more. That, in fact, I think is what encouraged our sisters and brothers in Gaza so much when they saw college students who primarily were not Muslims. They finally saw somebody trying to do something with their hands, with their body. And they finally said, finally, someone is putting their body on the line for us. And it encouraged them. And so I didn't have to go to bed wondering, well, how did I put my body on the line? How did you put your body on the line? And what frightens me the most, and I felt this even as a Christian, is that one day we will meet Allah, and Allah will ask us, when I gave you the opportunity to use your hands, why did you choose just to use your mouth? When I gave you an opportunity to use your hands, why did you just feel it in your heart as if you are an amputee who has no hands? It doesn't encourage me, it terrifies me. That one day we will be in the presence of Allah and have to answer why we did so little when we had so much. It terrifies me. I can't speak for you. I know I am better than this. I know I'm stronger than this. And what I believe in my heart is you feel the same. You know you could do more. You know you could. That's why you cry. Not because you're helpless, but because you know you could do more, and for whatever reason you talked, no one talked you out of it, you talked yourself out of it. I'm not okay with that. And then please, if I have violated a practice or a principle here by raising my voice, please forgive me. If I've offended you by my emotion, please, I meant no offense. I'm just speaking what I feel burning in my soul, that we are, I don't even know that we're scratching the surface of our potential. Either you are terrified by that or encouraged by it, or both. But I know we could do so much more.
I'm going to offer a quick gathering thought, if you will, and we're going to pray and head to prayer, inshallah. With respect to the last two questions, collective power, collective action, and unification. That gathers the local, the national, the international. And those three things, one of our teachers used to talk about al-aql wal-ilm wal-irada. Al-aql wal-ilm wal-irada. Everybody has a measure of intelligence that God has given to them, a measure of knowledge that God has given to them, and will. Right? I think what Shaun is speaking to is a deficit in the collective will of the community. And as much as, you know, tonight's session in many ways was unconventional. But when I talk about collective power, collective will, and collective action unification, we need to include a broader range of voices. You can't have action just on the basis of an intellectual elite, right? If all you have is an intellectual elite sharing ideas, and it doesn't translate and it doesn't have a continuity with a body of people who can carry those ideas forward on the ground, then it has limited effectiveness. So that's, inshallah, we pick that idea up maybe in future sessions. We make dua together. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi adada khalqihi wa rida nafsihi wa zinata arshihi wa midada kalimatihi. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi adada khalqihi wa rida nafsihi wa zinata arshihi wa midada kalimatihi. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi adada khalqihi wa rida nafsihi wa zinata arshihi wa midada kalimatihi. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي وأزواجه أمهات المؤمنين وذريته وأهل بيته كما صليت على آل سيدنا إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. I want to thank everybody once again. Thank people. Some people had a hard time getting here. But thank you for coming out. And this will be every Tuesday for the month of July, inshallah. So we look forward to seeing everybody. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Just in time. Very good. Thanks, Marco.